Hello and welcome to the SilverStripe screencast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about different kinds of lists in SilverStripe, and specifically we're going to add pagination to our list. So just a bit about what we'll cover here. First, we'll do that brief overview of the different kinds of lists in SilverStripe. Then we'll create that paginated list. We will bring that paginated list into the template and create some pagination links. And lastly, we'll customize it a bit. So just a brief overview here, get some background established before we start coding. Right now we've been working with mostly data lists to render a collection of data, but it's important to note that there are all kinds of lists that SilverStripe Framework offers you, each of which addresses some special concern. So here are a few common lists you might use. Array list is the most primitive form of list. It just contains arbitrary data, doesn't do anything particularly special, but it's very useful in just how minimal it is. So data list, we talked about that. This is used for pulling data from the database, and its main feature is that it provides an API for updating the query that defines that collection of records. Paginated list is what we're going to talk about today. It assigns a limit and offset to your list based on a request parameter, and it also exposes an API for determining what page is active and what pages are available. Another one you see a lot is grouped list. This is a really useful one that allows you to break your result set into sublists with their own headings. So you might have several lists that are organized by category or by city. So grouped list is really good for that. Now all these lists implement the SSList interface. An interface is not quite like a subclass, but it's a way of specifying certain methods that have to be present in a given class. So all these lists have to know how to do the basic functions of being a list. So that includes iterating over the list, obviously, adding to the end of the list. We use a method called add. Every list must have that. Getting the first or last member of the list. First and last are the methods we use for that. Removing an item from the list, getting a result that matches a key value pair, transforming the list into a simple PHP array, and getting the size of the list. So all those methods have to be in every single list, and then the list can go off and do its own thing and take on its own identity, like with pagination or with a data query or something like that. So that's sort of the foundation of how these lists work. So paginated list is just one implementation of this specification. And in addition to all the above functionality, it does provide us with those valuable tools of dealing with pagination, and we'll look into all of that next. So now we're going to create that paginated list. In the previous lesson, you'll remember we created a search form that produced a list of results. Right now, the results are artificially limited to 20. For performance reasons, we've got over 100 records. We don't want to just dump them all out on the template. So looking at the template, we do have some static HTML for the pagination. So we're going to work on activating that. As said before, SilverStripe's paginated list class is essentially just a wrapper for a data list that does all the legwork for us. It will automatically look at the request and add the correct limit clause to the data list, and it will also provide a public API for determining what page is active and what pages we have available. So let's look at the property search page.php, and we'll find the return value of our index action. This is where all the searching happens. This is all the legwork of our search, really. And right now, it just returns a data list. So let's have it return a paginated list instead. First things first, we need to remove that artificial limit that we've applied. So let's just go in and change property get limit 20 to just property get. And now let's wrap the results in a paginated list. So all I'm going to do here is instantiate a paginated list. I pass it the data list, and I also need to pass it the request. It may seem odd that we have to pass the request, but this is done in the interest of keeping the list loosely coupled. If the list were request aware, it would introduce tight coupling, which makes unit testing more difficult, and it renders the class less extensible. So thanks to a wealth of default values that come pre-baked into paginated list, we're actually ready to just render these results on the template right now. So let's add the pagination to the template. We'll have a look at property search page.ss, and we'll find the HTML for the pagination. Now, up until now, the only syntax we've used on a list has been loop. But the list itself actually has properties too, much like a data object. So let's use some of the properties we get from paginated list to render this pagination. So we'll wrap the whole UI in the condition results.morethanonepage. If that returns true, we should show the pagination. Then, if we're on anything but the first page, we should see the results.previousLink. And that'll provide just a simple arrow, a left arrow to go to the previous page. We'll do the same with the results.nextLink. And in the middle, we're just going to loop through results.pages. Now, each one of these pages that comes through in the loop has 3 different properties. We have the page number, page num. We have the current bool property, which tells us if the page is current. Current bool might seem like an odd choice of a name, but I think it's because current is kind of a keyword in PHP, so it's probably just done to disambiguate. Not too sure on the story with that, but it's just one of those odd things you have to remember. $link is obviously the link to the page. So now that we've created this pagination, we'll try it out and see how it works. And notice that when we click on the links, it injects a new request parameter called start into the URL. And start takes on the value of the offset in the result set. So start 10, start 20, whatever. Also important to notice here, the search parameters persist through the navigation. When I do a search, it puts all that search stuff into the URL, and the way the pagination works is it's additive, so it actually just augments that GET request. It doesn't overwrite it with just a simple start equals 10 or whatever. It's always aware of what the existing GET parameters are. So let's dig a little bit deeper here, and we'll use some more properties of the paginated list to create a summary of results. So at the top here, after I check if results is returning true, I'm going to show a summary of how many records are available. So I'll say showing results.pageLength, so it's going to say showing 10 results, and then I'll say results.totalItems. So that will show how many results are actually available without the pagination. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that if we have a lot of pages, this might break the UI. Right now, it just doesn't. It will render the pages infinitely. So that's kind of a problem. If we have 30, 40 pages or something, we don't want to show all those. So instead of results.pages, let's use results.pagination summary, which will just show us some of the nearby pages to the active one. In other words, we don't want to see page 17 of 30 if we're on page 2. So we probably just want to see 2, 3, 1, and we want to know that 30 is the last page. So let's change results.pages to results.pagination summary. Now the key here is that you're going to check if link exists, then we'll show the page. If it doesn't, we know that this is the empty result that's intended to show the existence of suppressed pages. So right there, we're just going to put ... Another thing to keep in mind is you can customize how much context you would like by passing an integer to pagination summary. By default, it's going to show 4 pages of context, but you can feel free to call results.pagination summary and pass 7, 8, 10, whatever amount of context you want. All right, that all works great, but the pagination is still configured with default values, most notably a limit of 10 results per page. Let's update that. So off of my PaginatedList constructor, I'm going to call the chainable method setPageLength, and I'll just change that to 15 just because. And another parameter we might want to customize is the request parameter that is used. In some cases, you might have a conflict with the variable start in the URL. Unlikely. Maybe you just prefer something shorter. Just for the purposes of demonstrating this, I'm going to assume that that's the case. So we'll use set pagination get var to just s for start. And that'll maybe, I don't know, keep our URL a little bit cleaner. So there we go. Now let's test it out. And we see that now we're getting 15 results per page, and we have the S in the URL instead of start. So that's all for this tutorial on paginated lists. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below.